everyone, it's Miss Witten here to talk with you a little bit about volume and mass. So some key vocabulary that we'll use throughout this lesson is volume, capacity, mass, units of measurement, and then the key word that we see in word problems, how many more. So starting with volume, volume is the amount of space a substance occupies inside of a closed container. So really all that means is if you filled up a bottle or a bathtub or a fish tank or a coffee cup with water or coffee or whatever the substance may be, it has to be a closed container so your liquid doesn't go everywhere. That is the measure of how much liquid is inside of that container, how much substance. If you were making slime, for instance, it would be how much slime is in your container that you're making it in. That is the volume. Capacity, on the other hand, is the maximum amount that something can contain. So if you have that bathtub or coffee mug or fish tank or whatever container you're putting something in, that is the most it can be filled up with. So your capacity can be bigger than your volume sometimes, but your volume can't go past your capacity, or else you're going to have coffee or water or slime going all over the place because it's too much. It goes over capacity. The volume is too much. So your capacity can be a little bit different than your volume depending on what you're measuring. Mass is the measure of the amount of matter in an object. So mass is kind of how heavy something is. You'll learn a lot more about matter and what that means later on in science and higher grades. But just know that the mass is the measure of the amount of matter in an object. So kind of think of it about how heavy it is. Units of measurement, that is what we use to measure volume and mass with. So that's kilograms, grams, liters, and milliliters, which we will get into a little bit in a couple of slides. But you may also remember units of measurement from area and perimeter, because you can also measure things with yards and miles and centimeters and inches. Those are all examples of units of measurement, but those are really important with volume and mass because you can't measure mass with liters and milliliters in the same way that you can't measure volume with grams and kilograms. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But again, these key words, how many more, think about what operation that would mean. A lot of times with these problems, you'll see in the word problems, they'll say how many more liters or how many more grams. So when you see how many more, that is a key word to tell us that we are going to subtract. So our first unit of measurement I want to talk about is volume. So the units of measurement that go with volume are liters and milliliters. Now there are a lot of different ways we can measure volume, and you guys will learn a lot more about different units of measurement. For example, there's gallons, there's cups, there's liters, milliliters, there are pints, there are quarts, there are all types of units of measurement, but just for now, we're going to focus on liters and milliliters. So liters, you'll see, has that big L. So if you are writing out an answer to something, let's say something was 10 liters, you're going to put 10 and then that big L to show us that there are liters. Now, liters, when you could visualize it in your head, it's about the size of this carton of milk. So you guys are probably familiar with a gallon of milk. A liter is not quite as big as a gallon. It's more so this size of milk. Sometimes if you buy a carton of milk at the store, it's not the little cartons you get of chocolate milk at lunch. It's the bigger cartons that you guys will probably seen in the store, or maybe you have it in your fridge. That is about a liter. There's also liter water bottles that some of you might have seen. A really popular term that you'll find with liters is a 2-liter bottle of soda. Think about your typical bottle of soda that you would have at your birthday party. That is 2 liters. So think about half of that is just 1 liter. Now, milliliters are really, really tiny liters. So milli means 1,000 milliliters in 1 liter. So a milliliter is 10 little drops of water. This is kind of showing us an eyedropper. If you guys have ever used that to put eye drops in, if you do 10 of those little drops, that equals 1 milliliter. So you would have to have a 1,000 milliliters to make up, so a bunch of those little dots to make up 1 liter. And sometimes you will see problems that say if I have 5 liters of something, how many milliliters am I going to have? So to solve problems like that, what you'll have to do is you'll have to take the amount of liters and multiply them by 1,000. And we can use our multiples of 10 rule. So we can do 5 times 1 to get 5. And then we can put 3 zeros behind it to get 5,000 milliliters. They will also ask you how many more liters or how many more milliliters are in this container. When you have problems like that, you just need to make sure that your units are the same. You cannot do liters minus milliliters or milliliters minus or plus liters, either one. You cannot do those. They have to be liters minus liters, liters plus liters, milliliters minus milliliters, so on and so forth. You have to make sure that your units of measurement are the same, because a whole carton of milk would be a whole lot different than a few eye drops worth of water, right? I think that would get people a little bit confused if they were trying to remeasure that same exact volume. So keep that in mind. So when we're reading volume, something really important to note, these are a few examples of how you'll see different volume questions. Something super duper important to notice is this beaker, for example. So when you pour yourself a glass of water, or if you've ever used a baking measuring cup, you can see that the water kind of makes this ring where it dips down a little bit in the front and it's a little bit higher in the back. So when you're measuring volume, which one do you read? Well, you actually are going to read this front one right here, this front line where it kind of dips down. So for example, this would be about 1, 2, this would be about 3.5. If it was liters or milliliters, doesn't tell us on this beaker right here, so we'll just pretend like they're milliliters. But make sure you always read the front line if it does have that. Other times it'll give you examples like this, and it'll say, how many more liters are in beaker A than beaker B? Well, first we have to decide how many liters are in each of them. So beaker A has 300 liters and beaker B has about 50 liters. Now see, they're kind of marked different. They're the same size, but they're marked different. So always be careful with that. And if they said how many more liters, we know that that is subtraction. So you would do 300 minus 50 to get 250 liters. Now they could also ask you that question in this third set of beakers over here. Or they might ask you a question like, total, how many milliliters are in these beakers combined? So all those keywords tell us that we have to add all of these beakers together. So if this is 300, we can tell because it hits, this line hits the 300, this one hits the 200, and this little one over here is the 30. So I'm going to add all those up to get 530. And again, it doesn't tell us if they're milliliters or liters. Usually it'll tell us in the problem, but I'm just going to say that they're milliliters just for the sake of this problem. So that is a really quick way to read your volumes. So next up, we have mass, and our units of measurement for mass are going to be grams, which is this little g, or kilograms, which is a big K and a little g. So if I were writing out 12 grams, I would write it like that, or 12 kilograms, I would write it out like that. Now, the difference between grams and kilograms is a gram weighs about a paper clip. So if you have a paper clip nearby, you can grab one. Or I also like to think of it like a graham cracker or a Teddy Graham. That is about a gram. So you can imagine, even if you don't have the objects near you, you can imagine that's pretty lightweight. So that's a gram. A kilogram weighs about the weight of your textbook. So think about back to your math textbook. Think about how heavy that was. It's pretty heavy, right? It's kind of similar to like a pound that we sometimes measure our weight in. So just in the same way that there were 1,000 milliliters in 1 liter, there are 1,000 grams in 1 kilogram. So it would take 1,000 paper clips to get about the same mass or about the same weight as it would your math textbook. So that would be a lot of paper clips, right? So keep that in mind when you're talking about grams and kilograms. Now, measuring mass. You can measure mass with some type of scale, right? Because it's kind of similar to weight. So there's these scales right here. Those are balance scales. So sometimes you'll see problems like this where they want you to have this side equal to this side. So if you're solving a problem like that, you have to say, okay, I'm missing something here and I want it to be this weight, right? So I have 129 kilograms plus whatever this number is going to equal 489 kilograms. So we're going to do the opposite of addition, which is subtraction, to get our answer. So you can do 589 minus 129, and you're going to get 360 kilograms. Same way with milliliters and liters, make sure that your units of measurement are the same. So if you cannot add and subtract grams and kilograms from each other, because in the same way we did with milliliters and liters, if they gave you 7 grams and wanted to know how many kilograms is that, then you would have to actually divide 7 by 1,000, and we can't do that. So more likely than not, they would say 7 kilograms is equal to how many grams. And to figure that out, you could do 7 times 1,000, because there's 1,000 kilograms in 1 gram, to say there are 7,000 grams in 7 kilograms, because there's going to be a ton of little paper clips to add up to that textbook. Now, some other ways we can measure mass that you might see, you might have stepped on the scale at your doctor's office recently to get your weight. That's one way. You can measure mass in pounds or in kilograms, but we are going to focus on kilograms. There's also this scale that's kind of like a food scale that has this little thingy right here that goes around kind of like a clock, and it tells us the weight. So this would either be kilograms or in pounds. You might have seen this at your grocery store when you've been in the produce section. And that is another way that we can measure mass. So sometimes you'll see a question like this that says, what is the mass of this object, or how much does this object weigh? And you follow this little pointer, and you would probably say, well, if that's 1, I think that would be about 1 kilogram. So those are a few different ways that you are going to see mass. That was a really quick overview. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, please comment on this video or reach out to your teacher during their office hours. They are more than happy to help you. Happy learning, and I hope this was helpful.